Hey guys, Will's Garage here. In this video, I'm going to be installing this differential onto the rear subframe and then remounting the subframe back onto the car. But just a little update since the last video where I installed these SPL arms. This top one here was a little too short, but SPL quickly sent out the replacement for me for the correct length. As you can see, the one in the front is slightly shorter than the one on the top, so a little bit of delay there, but once I received that, I was able to swap them out real quick. But yeah, getting back to the differential, when I was looking for this differential, I was in between the 4.1 gear ratio versus this one, the 4.44. And if you guys are wondering, this is for a 6-speed manual on the E92 M3. It's not the DCT. 4.1 seems to be the more popular one for obvious reasons. Because, you know, driving on the highway in a 4.44 is just way too short, and for longer, higher speed tracks, this probably wouldn't work out really well. But when I calculated the gear ratio, top speed for every gears, you know, running through corner by corner for the top 3 tracks that I normally go to here in Northern California, I think it's going to work out pretty well. Certain tracks are going to work better than others, of course, but that's the case with every single gear ratio. And every setup. So one of the things I'm going to have to play around with are the tire profiles. Right now I'm running 275/35. Eventually I want to go wider to 295s. And it seems like 295/30 on an 18-inch tire is going to work out for a square setup. Of course, I want to prefer to stick with a 35 profile tire because I want to make the gear ratio even shorter. But if you guys have any experience with tire profiles, you know, preferably I want to run a square setup in 295s. Let me know. Let me know if it's possible to run 295/35. I'm afraid that's going to be too big, especially in the front. I think 295/35 will work in the rear though. So some experimentation that I'm going to have to do with this setup, and that's just part of the fun. At least for me, it is. So we're going to have to find out what's the optimal setup. Oh, and by the way, I did clean up some rust spots on the rear subframe here, and I painted it with Rust-Oleum satin black, and the color matches up pretty well. So just FYI. Anyways, I'm just going to stop talking now and go ahead and install this guy. Alright guys, so the diff is installed into the subframe. Now I'm going to put the subframe into the car. Alright guys, so here's a different angle of the transmission jack I'm using for lifting the diff and rear subframe up into position. I gotta say, it is way harder to lift this and line everything up than it is to remove. As with everything, putting these back together is much more difficult. But I'm really glad I got this transmission jack. As you saw earlier, I tried using a regular floor jack and it didn't work out really well. So if you guys are doing this, I definitely recommend getting this transmission jack from Harbor Freight. And yeah, I used a 1/2-inch impact, even though the instructions says not to do it. If you don't use one, it's gonna take forever to crank up. However, I do not recommend using the impact for lowering it because it lowers very abruptly. But for lifting something heavy like this rear subframe with a differential, it works out really well. So I got the rear bolt lined up. The front one is easy to get centered because it has a little protruding knob, as you can see right here. So that, as long as you get that lined up with the front subframe bushing, the rear one should line up. So I'm ready to torque the drive shaft down. Torque spec for this is 30 foot-pounds and then a 45-degree turn. I'm also going to torque the half axle shafts. These are torqued to 89 foot-pounds. Man, torquing these down are an absolute workout. Alright, so now that I got the drive shaft, the half axle shafts torqued down, I'm going to put in the rear heat shield. Alright guys, so I got everything bolted up. Subframe torqued down, all the arms torqued down, rear brakes reinstalled, e-brake is all set. I reinstalled the center console. What else? Oh yeah, the X pipe is also mounted up with all the heat shields and everything. Drive shaft is torqued down, axle shafts torqued down. I think everything is set and ready to go. And did I mention putting everything back together is way more of a pain in the ass than taking it apart. But anyways, now I just have to bleed the brakes, install the rear section of the exhaust, and then take it for a little spin. I'm gonna repark the car and install some adjustable arms in the front section here, and then align the car.